Ladies and gentlemen, today I've got the Patti Mayonnaise, Yoga Jones, Miss Connie Shulman. Connie, how are you?
I'm great. I'm looking at all your cute little characters you've got back there.
It's if you ask my wife, she says it's a sickness.
Oh, but
So,
it's like if, in the range of sicknesses, it's a good one.
yeah, I
Oh, I
suppose so.
love that. Yeah, that's really fun.
Yeah, it's just
Like I could interview you, do you know what I mean? Because I have like questions. When did that start? How old were you when you got your first little thing? Yeah, but
oh, I'd say about 90% of this stuff has just gotten throughout the years. Like the stuff up on top is a lot of Christmas gifts from my wife and kid and
right.
stuff like that. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but
So
yeah,
the
and
bulk of it is as an adult,
yeah,
not as
right when I
yeah.
got out of the Navy, I started buying more stuff. So um, it's filled out quite nicely, if I can't say so myself. So
No, it's really sweet. What I've found out as I've gotten older that kids that watch Doug have gotten older too.
mhm.
And they're not 12-year-olds coming up and saying something to me. They're all like, early 30s. And it still sort of takes me back when like a 34-year-old will come up and say, oh my gosh. Because I'm still thinking everybody is a 12-year-old.
Well, I mean, I guess it's all about perspective because depending on my day and temperament, I could be a 12-year-old from time to time, but it just depends on the day and
Yeah, no, of
what
course.
kind of TV shows or movies you're watching and what kind of
Right.
thought process is get elicited from that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah. So I guess I just want to thank you again for doing this. It was really
Thank you.
like I said, one of the first cartoons I remember seeing as a kid was Doug. And I didn't realize that you were in Orange is the New Black until I was walking by my wife watching it because she watches her shows and I watch my shows. And then a lot of times we'll like, oh man, this is really good. Or she'll say, oh man, this is really good. I got to get him or I got to get her. And then I remember seeing you or hearing you when I was walking by and I'm like, oh shit, that's Patti Mayonnaise. My wife's like, what'd you say? And I'm like, that's Patti Mayonnaise. And then she didn't believe me. So I Googled you, I showed her to you, and she's like, wow, you've got a lot of useless knowledge up there in their head. And I said, exactly. But how did you get onto Doug and playing Patty?
Oh, okay. It's actually a pretty cool story. I can't remember what year it was
Mm-hmm.
that it started. You would probably know better than me. Either it was late 80s or early 90s, but I
93, 94.
I get you. I used to take aerobics. It was when aerobics was really
Yeah.
Pilates now is the new aerobics, but
Mm-hmm.
aerobics was everything. There was a studio on the Upper West Side that I used to go to all the time. Um, at the same time that I was going to take these exercise classes, I was doing a series of, I became a spokesperson for Kraft mayonnaise.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing all these mayonnaise commercials. And
Yeah.
it was just me. And I had this big wig on. And so I was on these commercials for years. So these commercials about mayonnaise were running.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking this aerobics class. One of the aerobics instructors came up to me and said, my husband is um, wants to make this cartoon.
Uh-huh.
He heard your voice watching your mayonnaise commercial. And he was like, that's the voice I want to use for one of the characters. And she was like, oh, she's in my aerobics class.
Mm-hmm.
I can ask her, I can ask her for you.
Yeah.
And so she did. And she said, would you mind coming up to our home and recording something for my husband of this thing that he's written? And, I was like, it's so funny because now I'd be like, would I have just gone?
Mm-hmm.
But this is changing times.
Yeah.
And I was like, sure. And so I went up to their house. They were up near me. I went up to their house and he had a little recorder and he had, some of the material out. Maybe told me a little bit about it. I mean, it was really early.
Yeah.
And so I recorded a couple of things for him and I left and I would see her, at aerobics again. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, okay, it's just something that's going to go nowhere. like a lot of things do. And then I don't know whether it was a couple of months later, but my agent called me and said, so they want to record some episodes for this Doug thing. I hadn't even remembered that he was calling it Doug.
Yeah.
So I was like, what are you talking about? And then the rest is sort of history. But that's how it started for me.
Now,
so you never know who you're going to meet in your exercise class, I guess.
I should start doing exercise classes. I mean, we usually just walk around the neighborhood with our dogs, my wife and my kid, and we'll ride bikes and stuff like that. So I'm gonna have to try aerobics. And you said Pilates is the new aerobics, so
right?
Get noticed. Did you know when you were, not so much when you recorded it, when you went and they're like, hey, we posed the idea, come up here and record. So after that, and your agent called you, and you started recording for the show. Did you know, like, you were onto something here? Did you guys know this was going to be as big as it was?
Well, I didn't watch cartoons as a kid or as an adult. And I had just had my son, and he was very little. So he was like a year old. So he hadn't watched cartoons either. So I didn't know, I wasn't in that world to know whether something was going to be a big hit or not in that animated world. But I think what I did know is that the group of people that, first of all, it started with Jim Jenkins. And when you meet him, you know that something special is going to happen, because he's just an extraordinary soul. And he's Doug, and he's the best of all of us. And so meeting him, I think I thought, being the special person he is, whatever he's going to touch here is going to be extraordinary. So that was one thing. And then at that point, when it was at Nickelodeon, we were all in the booth together recording, and he had assembled this incredible group of voice actors. And I'm not a voice actor, so I was the one person sort of that he got that didn't do voiceovers. They were all had incredible skills at manipulating their voice and doing things with it. So they all played many, many characters. I didn't do that because I'm an actress with a funny voice. Those are two different worlds. But to answer your question, after meeting him and then meeting the group of voiceover actors he had assembled, I guess I did think it had to be as special as Jim Jenkins was.
Yeah, well, that's completely understandable. I mean, you had Billy West, you had Fred Newman, you had all of these what would later to be not so much huge, because it's such a small word, but it's these voices of your childhood, the voices that you hear. And it's not so much you hear it just on one show, you hear it. Like I said, I knew you on the show, and that's the whole reason I started watching Orange is the New Black, because I was a guy. It was mainly a female cast, which is completely stupid to think about it like that. But it's like, it's probably just not for me. Like a lot of stuff is. There's just stuff that's not out there for me.
Of course.
There's stuff
for me either. Yeah. I mean, that show wasn't for me either. But the power of the voice is really interesting, because I would say that was the best job I've ever had, because that's all you've got. And to sort of be able to bring everything that you need to just in the voice. We know how powerful the voice is. We know it.
So go ahead, finish that. I'm sorry.
So that made that work experience probably the greatest job that I've had, for sure.
Now, when that name comes up, Patti Mayonnaise, what's like the first thought that, do you get transported back in time, or is it just something that you've lived with, or what is that feeling like when somebody's like, oh man, this is Patti,
I mean, just pure joy.
Yeah.
And what an incredible young woman she was.
Yeah.
And she was one of those characters that boys liked as well as girls liked. And, you know, Jim was pretty much ahead of his time, or not even. He was just relevant always. And the look of the show, the color of the characters, that he had this strong young girl who everybody liked. And he was, yeah, he was where we should always be. And he just figured it out. And it seemed kind of effortlessly because that's who he is.
Yeah, I can say out of all the characteristics, excuse me, you know, you had the strong female lead back in a time where you really didn't have a strong female lead. However, one of my favorite things is a guy that can't tan at all. I'm white as hell. I just can't get a tan to save my life. I go from red back to lily white.
Yeah.
You had the best tan in any cartoon I've ever seen.
Yeah. And it was like, what color tan? I mean, that was what was, I mean, that's why this show keeps coming back. And I do think people still talk about it. It had a great innocence to it and said a lot at the same time.
Now, when you were doing this show, you said when you guys all got together, you would go into the same studio in the booth and work together. Before that, before you guys were shooting that, had you met any of these other voice actors? I know you said you came from an acting world, so. No,
I hadn't met any of them. And Billy was doing two characters. You know, he was doing Doug and Roger. And I think because we were all together and he and I had a fair amount of stuff to do together, I felt like I was the luckiest person in the world to sort of watch and listen to what he was doing, what Fred was doing. I mean, there are so many sounds. It's not just people talking that go into this to bring it to life. And Fred, it was foreign to me, but I didn't know any of the people involved. And I knew Fran Brill a little bit from Sesame Street because she was doing Zoe, and knew of her, but I walked into a world I hadn't been in before, for sure.
Now, when you guys are, you know, just starting, did you guys do any like team building exercises? You guys all go out to dinner, try to get to know each other, or how does that usually work when you meet a new actor or actress?
Right. We didn't do that. I think the way that we kind of bonded was, for me, was there would be a lot of, and it's hilarious, a lot of group hubbub sounds.
Yeah.
That just go into, and you're ridiculous. You know, they're not lines, but it's just like chewing or, you know, you're at a Beats concert and you're laughing and you're making some ridiculous things. And to me, that's how we all bonded, in sort of the ridiculousness of all these grown-ups squished in a booth. You know what it's why we watch cartoons. It's because you're a child, and you can be a child again. And so we were all in like a sandbox, you know, together playing. And you immediately, I mean, I wish we all did that as adults, you know, that we all met at a playground and were on the swings, because there is something about that immediately sort of connects you on a very silly level. And so, you know, going out to, you know, for a drink after, I mean, this stuff was shot in the early morning. So we weren't, nobody was doing that, but it was being allowed to be a child with a group of other children and playing immediately connects you. When
you guys are doing that and you guys are connecting and playing and feeding off of each other, was it hard to pick up like that cadence or that rhythm, you know, from going from that acting to voice acting, or?
No, because I was surrounded by like 5 or 6 masters at what they do. And I had all these great teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And I mean, there was one time, like I said, I only did Patty's voice. Everybody else they were doing 2 or 3 characters. One time, Jim asked me if I could do Patty's father's voice. There was a scene with him, and nobody else was around. There wasn't anybody that could do it that day. He had like 2 lines or something. And I'm like, okay. And I was really nervous. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then I tried to lower my voice, right, and do something. And he's like, no, Connie.
At least he was honest right off the bat.
No, he's like, no, that's not going to work. And he got like, I don't know, like an AD or somebody to do it. Somebody that was sitting around that. So I learned so much from listening to what everybody else was doing. Was I able to pick it up and sort of do? Probably not. But you know what? They didn't need to. And I was like, I had this amazing character, and I loved her. And it was like, I'm just gonna, yeah. But because of that, I think my voice is very recognizable. If I was Fred, I don't know whether, because he's done so many, and Billy, and they've done so, whether you would know, okay, that's his voice, but you would put me with her.
Yeah.
Not with other characters.
You're like I said, you got a very distinct voice. And like I said, I heard it before I even saw you on the TV with the Orange is the New Black.
Oh, yeah. It is very strange when people will stop me, and they're not, I mean, they might not be stopping about Orange, they'll be stopping about Patty. And it's like they might have heard me say one thing, because you don't know that because it was a cartoon character, you wouldn't put my face with her, you would put a voice with her.
Did they get any, like I've talked to a few of you guys that have done voice acting, and you always see, whenever you talk to them, you see them, that you guys got mannerisms. And then sometimes the animators will animate those mannerisms into the character. Did you ever remember looking at it and like, oh man, they definitely pulled that from me? Or did you leave any mannerisms or leave any?
Well, I mean, at the time I had shorter, very blonde, short hair. And you start, it's like when you're married to somebody and they're like, you both are starting to look alike. And I felt like I was starting to, like, we were kind of looking alike. She had this light hair, and I'm it's not like I don't need, tomboy is probably not an expression people use anymore. But I was not girly, and she wasn't either, and she was sportier than I am. I'm not sporty, but I could see where, you start feeding off of each other, or you don't know whether it's like, oh, I'm feeding off of what she's doing. It's like you pick up from each other simultaneously. I guess.
What you were talking about being married, you can tell it when you work with somebody as well. Because whenever I've went to a new place, I work in the kitchen. So whenever you go to a new place, all the stuff you've learned from working with a set of people, a team, and you kind of bring it over, and then you start hearing like, oh man, that was, such and such's expression, and now I'm using it. And now it's crazy to see a new guy use it. Right. So I understand that 100%.
And it's really nice. That's how much we sort of impact one another without even knowing it. You just pick up on each other. And so I would say she and I were picking up on each other's stuff.
A little 50-50 type of thing.
Yeah, right.
Now, when you said your son, correct? He was about 1 when the show really started rolling. Now, has he since went back and started watching that, or was it something that he was like, oh, that's just mommy, or how did that work?
He has seen a lot of the episodes, and but you know what, he was more Cartoon Network.
Oh, okay.
He didn't do Nick and or Disney or Nickelodeon, which is where Doug was playing. No, he was more Ed and Eddie, and
fantastic.
he grew up with Cartoon Network, and so my daughter did too. So they weren't. I mean, they totally appreciate that I did that, but but they grew up on a different channel.
Wavelength. Yeah.
Isn't that
But,
funny?
yeah, it really is, because you know, whenever I have people over, and like my kids' friends will come over, you know, I'm pretty sure he gets tired of hearing it, because they'll hit him in the elbow, like, or they'll hit him in the ribs, they're like, hey, your dad's a really good cook. And he's like, I know, I've been doing this. And he's like, yeah, dad cooks. And I always like asking you guys stuff like that.
Of course, yes.
Well, it's just like kid, when your kids are up and around you, they're like, it's just what mommy does. It's just what daddy does. You know, it's nothing special. And then, you know, you're consistently like, oh, have you ever used Patti Mayonnaise to get out of anything? I always like asking that. Like, a traffic ticket comes up, a guy's just, you know, he's a Doug fan. You're like, hey man, can I get out of this? That's Patti. You know, have you ever tried to use it?
No, I did not do that, but I'm not going to say that on their end they didn't bring it up and maybe cut me some slack.
Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't do anything where I needed all that slack cut, but no, I have not.
I've talked to a few guys.
I don't use my characters like that. Yes.
I've talked to a few guys, and then their kids are what eggs them on. And like, hey, they're going through a drive-through, like, hey, you know, do Raphael, or hey, you know, do Carlise, or hey, do this voice. And then they'll order in that voice. And then they've got the entire restaurant laughing and happy, and everybody wants to take pictures. So I always like asking stories. Like, yeah. You know, so I always like asking and see what you guys have done with the character outside of, you know, this character. When Orange is the New Black came around, you know, we're going to segue just a little bit from Doug, because I like talking about what you guys have always done. And hopefully we have a little bit of time, because I want to talk about Fletch Lives, because I'm a huge Chevy Chase fan, and I love that series. But with Orange is the New Black, when that came around, was that just a call from the agent say, hey, we got a role? Or is that something that you knew? Was it yoga class this time, or Pilates?
You know what? This is when I had my son. I was doing a TV series for ABC out in Los Angeles called The Faculty. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman in the show with me, Nancy Lanahan, and she had just had a little girl, and I wanted to have a baby. And so I had my son about a year after that we had shot that series, and I was back in New York, and I'm like, I'm not going to act for a long time because I want to be a mommy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stay at home with my kid. And then I had a daughter, and I didn't act for 15 years. I kind of left to take care of my kids. And on the early side of it, I was doing Doug, but as far as pursuing or doing anything else, I wasn't. So about 15 years later, I'm married to an actor, and my kids were getting interested in it.
Yeah.
And I think I took them to meet, I don't know, a casting friend or something. And I had been doing other things. I was writing a book. I made a documentary, but I was not acting, anything like that. So I took them, and one of the casting people that I took them to said, where have you been? Where'd you go? And I'm like, this is where I went. I went, they're right here.
Yeah.
And as they were getting older, and I think I was doing some teaching too, I was like, I used to do this. And so I, at that point, had no agent. I'd been out of the business for like 15 years. Yeah. And I called a very close friend who ran his own agency. And I said, can I take you out to lunch? And I took him out to lunch. And I said, you know what? I'm kind of interested in feeling the water out a little bit. And he's like, oh, Connie, the business is so different. You know, he was a jaded agent New Yorker. And he's like, you know, everything's by email now. Headshots are in color now, you know. I'm like, so he pulled me out of the archives and was like kind of upgrading me. And I said, let's just see. So pretty much the first thing he sent me out on was I got these sides, a Netflix show. And I was like, Netflix at that point was, to me, was the little orange envelopes in the mail that you mail back in. And because it was really, really early, and this is going to be a streaming thing. I had no idea what they were talking about. But my husband, who I said is an actor, was doing House of Cards.
Fantastic show.
It was the first show on Netflix. So I was like, well, I have this Netflix thing. And so anyway, also you have to remember, I hadn't auditioned for anything in 15 years. So I was like, I couldn't even remember how to audition. I'm like, do you prepare? Do you memorize? And so I got these sides, and she was a yoga teacher. And so I was like, oh, this is based on a book. And once when I got the part, and I'll go back, everybody had read the book to prepare. I was like, oh, it's written, it's like on some book. I was just so out of it. And I was still in mommy world that I wasn't really thinking, oh, maybe it'd been useful to read the book, maybe. Anyway, so I learned the stuff, and I show up, and it was a new world because things were being done on tape, and everything was being taped. And this was a room full of so many diverse women auditioning to play this character. And I, went over there and I had never taken a yoga class in my life. So I was just like, I don't know. Yeah. And I was put on tape, and I left. And because it was sort of a first experience auditioning again, I was more like, thank God I lived through it, and I didn't have a breakdown on camera. And I think it was maybe the next day, like my agent friend called and said, well, you got this Netflix series. And I was like, oh my gosh, what does that even mean? Where's it shot? Like all of a sudden I was like, I'm not leaving the kids, the family, where is it? And he was like, it's in Queens, and it's a recur, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I thought, because I didn't prepare that well, and Jen Houston, who cast, I hope she's not listening here. But I thought she was a yoga teacher that came in and out of the prison, that she wasn't an inmate. And I didn't know she was an inmate until I went for the wardrobe fitting. And I thought they were going to give me some cute little Lululemon yoga pants and all this stuff. And she pulls out this like really boxy set of, sweatpants. And it was awful. And I was like, oh, I'm surprised that I thought you were getting, and they're like, you're an inmate. And I had to have the wardrobe person tell me. So that's how underprepared I was. And then, so, the rest is history. That is such a insane chapter in probably every woman's life, every actress life who was on the show. For me, it was a reentry into a world that I had left. Yeah. Not the prison world, but the acting world. But I was, I hadn't been in that world for a really long time. So to me, it was a reentry into a world that I had loved. Mm-hmm. And I was very, very lucky to have that opportunity. And no one knew that the show would be a hit. I mean, I guess like the same question about Doug, did you know that this was going to go crazy? I actually thought there wouldn't be an audience for it.
I mean, it's a fantastic show. Like it hooked me off of the first episode. It was like I said, it was your voice when I saw my wife watching it. We had to start going back and watching more episodes because I think she was 5-6 episodes into the first season. I'm like, I want to watch this too. And it was very rarely do you see a show movie that has so many characters and
Oh yeah.
so many characters that are just, they're intertwining with each other. You got characters that stand out in their standalone episodes where it shows where and how they got to prison or what they did or some of the stuff that led them to where they were at. But you very rarely do you see a show that had no filler episodes. There was not one episode in the entire series that just felt like they just needed 90 minutes here, or they needed 60 minutes here, whatever it was. Everything felt like it had a purpose.
Yeah,
and you said you were
saying it. Yeah, I mean, there were huge show and got bigger.
Yeah.
As it went along. I mean, every season, all of these new characters came in that there wasn't anyone that didn't have an impact and that shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
Whatever they did, from Lori Chin's Chang, who would come in and out. I think she ran like the little concession thing at the prison, and to the bigger characters, but it was like everybody had a reason to be there and was a puzzle piece that had to be there in order for it to be a complete picture.
And the seeds you guys sown, in the early episodes that came to fruition and grew once it hit the season finale, the series finale, or mid-season, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. It was, like I said, it was just a fantastic show. And you'd been out, you said, for 15 years at that point. On that first day of shooting, what was going through your mind, or what was your body doing at that point?
I was freaking out.
Yeah.
I was freaking out. I was having a nervous breakdown. I was so freaked out. And this was huge. This wasn't like you're showing up and there's a crew of 5 people.
Yeah.
And that you've got a couple of actors and this was huge. And I think the first day, I can't remember if I shot my scene. I had never met Taylor. If I had shot my big she has this whole thing about a mandala. And it was a big scene, and we were at the cafeteria. Anytime that the shots where you'd look on the call sheet and it was in the cafeteria, you knew there were like 1 million people in there.
Yeah.
So it was cafeteria shot, and all the little numbers of people that are going to show up, and they're so small that there's so many people that so I walked into that. I think that was the first day, and so many crew, so many extras, and we were at this table in the cafeteria, and I had this really intimate scene with Taylor, and she was just starting too. And it really, not that it calmed me down, but knowing this was like her first day, and Piper, who wrote it, was also there watching. And for Taylor, that was really scary. She was playing, we were all playing real people, or a lot of us were.
Yeah.
So there's this added sort of responsibility to be a truthful person. And even though you're not going to be that person, you want to be a real, truthful essence.
Yeah.
And so Taylor had that on her back. And, when you are shooting the first episode of something, you're setting a tone, it's really scary. And when you realize everybody there is under some pressure, so, even though you could hear my heart beating out of my body, it was beating so loud. And she kind of I think Taylor expressed her own angst. And that sort of does calm you down. But it took a couple episodes for me to feel like I had my sea legs back.
What were some of those? How long were some of those days? Would you guys?
Oh my gosh, really, really long.
Yeah.
And the more people that are in a scene, the longer the day is going to be.
How come?
there just
Set up?
because you've got to get so much coverage. So, you know, in a big cafeteria, there might be 10 different points in the cafeteria room. You've got to get coverage. Each time you cover that, you have to turn the camera, the equipment, everything gets moved. And, you know, so moving the equipment and resetting up can take hours.
Yeah.
A couple of days that I remember being really, really long. There was, I think it was the season finale of, now I can't remember which season, we were in a lake.
Oh, was it
Maybe
three or
three.
four? Yeah, it was like three going into four or
Oh,
two
it was
going into
three
three. Yeah.
because number four, I think, is when Pusey died. And
Yeah.
that finale was the one of the longest days too. And it was devastating that day because, you know, you love a character as a
Yeah.
viewer, you love a character, but as an ensemble of actors, you love that actress.
Yeah.
And of all of the people to have that, she was such the heart and soul of so much. So it was devastating for everybody. And so you're shooting that. But the day at the lake, it was November and the water was really cold.
Yeah.
And we were all in sort of like wetsuits under our wardrobe, and they had heat tents set up, and it went on and on. So there are some days that are really, really long.
Yeah.
I mean, one time when the whole Judy King thing, and we were on the roof late at night, our call to get there was 11 o'clock at night. So, you know, you're there through the entire night. So, some days can be really long, and it all depends on how many actors are in the scene. Really, when you're lucky and it's a gift to be able to have a scene on a show like Orange that has so many characters where it's a one-on-one scene,
Yeah.
you know you're going to get out in a reasonable amount of time because it's just two people.
Yeah.
But that show didn't have, there weren't lots of those. There were, I mean, for me, because I was a recur, I was usually with a lot of people.
Now, with that scene you were talking about when that was one of not only the hardest things to watch, and then a few years later, you know, you see it on live TV or see it on social media in real life. Such a tragic event, but you know that when you're watching a TV show, you're watching a cartoon, and to an extent, you know it's fake. But you guys, and I've said this with voice actors and actresses and actors before, you guys take, even though the character's three-dimensional inside what we're watching, it's a two-dimensional character that you guys go and make it into a three-dimensional character. And her being the heart and soul of that entire show, I was not ready. Like, it caught me off guard. Like, now something's going to happen. Like, Tasty's going to knock him over. Something's going to happen where she's not going to die. And then when she died, I just, my eyes started watering. I was trying so hard not to cry. Like, I'm like thinking about it now, trying so hard not to just go back down that road. But it was one of the most worst times ever being a fan of a show. Because, you know, everybody's favorite characters is generally Red or, you know, you and Crazy Eyes. It's generally those. But when you see such a character that is so loved, that everybody always had great things to say about her character, and then her legs literally just taken out from underneath of her, with scenes like that, you know, what is going obviously, if it's a listening as response like that for me or anybody else, I'm pretty sure you guys are going through a lot of the same stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And
what do you do to cope with that?
You know, to be Danielle Brooks, who is over there sobbing take after take, Uzo over there, all of these women that had spent 4 years with Samira's character. Because the thing about the show, we were put in little tribes. I mean, that's just what happened. Here were the white girls, here were the African American women, you know, and it was, so I didn't have tons of opportunities to work with those actresses.
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't in their scenes. And the loss that those women had for Pusey um, really, I mean, it was devastating. I know it was devastating for me, and I wasn't in her tribe. I wasn't
Yeah.
in her group. And those, Danielle and Samira were buddies from the beginning of this show. And I think it was really shocking
Mm-hmm.
to everybody on the show. And I can't even remember when I found out that was going to happen. I don't know whether it was the actual day that we didn't get I don't know whether I knew that was happening that much sooner too.
Yeah.
But, I think the point being that, what character would make the biggest impact if she
Yeah.
had to be killed that way. And it was definitely Poussey, because everybody loved her so much.
Yeah, like I said, she did.
Yeah.
She just knocked that role out of the park. And
Yeah.
we'll segue just a little bit of happier things. Just because it's just like I said, it was such a huge bummer seeing that character go.
Yeah, it was terrible. Terrible. And that was a very long day. Yeah.
I can only imagine, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys did not really sleep that well, that night. But I've asked this question numerous times to a whole bunch of different people. What is food like on the set with this stuff, with shows like this?
What is the food like?
Yeah, I mean, do you guys eat pretty good, or is it just like, I just got to eat something to get some energy type of thing?
Okay, well, there's two foods. There are the foods that you are asked to eat in the show itself.
Yeah.
And if you were going to ask me what that tasted like, I would say I don't know, because I did anything I could to avoid that. So some of the best acting going on is watching people pretend they're eating.
Yeah.
Because you are pushing it around the plate. You're mid-bite maybe, or you go to the one thing that actually looks like something that you could get down without gagging. And it's usually something like a piece of bread. So there's a lot of soaking bread. Now, this was prison food, which wasn't food that you've been preparing in your career. So it was so gross, so nasty. So there's that food, right? And then there's the food, then there's craft service food. And then there's the food that'll go around that's actually been prepared, and you can, can give yourself some nutrition. We all live in such a funny age where everybody's foods have gotten so individualized, and due to allergies or diet or just whatever nutritional guru you're following at the time. So I think most people brought their own stuff.
Yeah. Now you live pretty close to where you guys were filming, right?
Well, I'm in Manhattan, and so we shot at Kaufman Astoria Studio. So it was in Queens. So it took me 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes to get there.
Now, when something like that, I always like hearing or like asking these type of questions, because it's something I like knowing that inside baseball about what you guys do. Is it like a normal job? Like, you guys have, breaks, allotted breaks, and you can like walk off set and go get something to eat? Or do you guys have to, once you're there type of thing?
Once you're there, you're there. Like, I just took this subway there, and I would get like a really like 5 a.m. call. There are rules, like, I don't know whether it's before 6, you would get, the way they treat the transportation, I think there's reimbursement, or you would, if some of the stuff, the exterior scenes were shot outside of the city.
Okay.
All the prison scenes inside were shot at the studios, but we had location shots. So a lot of the times, obviously the lake, for example, but anytime you were outside of the prison, we shot in, I think the name of the town was Orangeburg, actually, and shot about, how far was that? Maybe 35 minutes out of the city. And we were in vans going there. But you would get, there'd be lunch break. And I mean, the thing about acting, you're in downtime so much of the time
Yeah.
anyway. So it's like you're on break the majority of the day because you're waiting for the next scene or you're waiting for the setup of your scene. Do you know what I mean? So it's like your actual time. Now that I'm speaking as a recur on that show.
Yeah.
So, ask Laura Prepon or Taylor or Kate Mulgrew what they were doing. They had a fuller day than I would have. So my experience is there's a lot of waiting around. You're on
Like hurry
breaks
up and
a
wait.
lot.
It's like a hurry up and wait type of situation. So
Yeah, you're paid to wait.
yeah.
You're waiting a lot. And it's difficult because you can have this great scene and you're waiting and you're waiting. And by the time that you're called to do it, you're like out of it. You've
Yeah.
taken a nap, you've read 50 pages of something else. And then you have to like get yourself back in
that character,
some idea of the scene. Yeah.
Now, what is your method as far as getting into either the head of the character or getting into that specific scene? I mean, do you have a like a ritual, or do you have, what's your process?
Right. You know what? People ask that a lot, and it's like I give the worst answer because I don't have one.
No.
Clearly from my preparation story for the audition, but you know what? For
That's a
me,
fantastic story.
it's my life. It's my life experience. It's like I'm Connie. Mm-hmm. I'm coming to play this character named Erica Jones. Mm-hmm. I'm not the woman, the real woman, but I can connect with her. I can connect. I've never been in prison, but I certainly can connect to making a mistake.
Yeah.
And to feeling lost or lonely, or man, am I the only one that sees this experience this way, or find something to hold on to help you get through a really rough time? Like I can connect to that without having that woman's experience of that. So
the similarities,
it's like my life experience. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to go, okay, she's trapped. Yeah. She's trapped and she's looking to meditation or yoga to give her a sense of escape or control or something. And it's like, okay, what do? I find crap to help me feel better, whether it's a vacuum. I'm an obsessive vacuumer.
Now, do you because we just got one. I've got 4 dogs and I've got 1 cat.
4 cats. That's why we vacuum.
Well, yeah. So I got the 2 that I have. They're the bigger dogs. They're huskies, and they both have long fur. So we got this. What is the
Dyson? Did you get a Dyson?
Well, we have the Dyson Push, but we have this little one that it's self-emptying, and it's like a Roomba type of thing. And then it'll just do the entire house. It's fantastic because instead of going and vacuuming 2 or 3 times a day because of the dog's hair and the cat's hair, exactly. That does it when we're not here. And then all I have to do is just do it one more time, and then I mop every night. And it's completely cut down my cleaning time. This sounds like a sponsored ad by Roomba. It's really not, but they're expensive. But it's a great tool to have. So I don't know if you'd look into having one of those or not.
I thank you very much. I'm getting some stuff from this podcast here, and this is a gift, a pearl that you've given me that I'll.
This is the stuff you need. So.
Yeah, but the point is, we can all, if you've chosen to be an artist in your profession, and being a chef is an artist. You want to make food that people love.
Yeah.
Because you love food, I would think. And you love the pleasure it brings to people. And it's the same, it's like you're an actress. You want people to love that character or walk in that person's shoes and know and empathize and understand and find, like, I'm not that person, but I can understand why that person made the choices they did.
Yeah.
And so you draw on yourself, and that's what I do. Other people, I went to theater school. I did the theater games and all the prep stuff. I don't use any of this.
So I generally, always post, and I'm going to pull them up because I got a few questions that people had asked that they wanted to ask you. I always put
Oh,
it out there.
okay. That's nice.
I always put it out there like, hey, I'm going to be interviewing and speaking. And I don't like saying the word interview because I want to, even though I am asking you questions and
it's a conversation.
yeah,
Right?
that's what I like. It's just, we're talking about vacuums and we're talking about food and we're talking about dogs and shit. So it's just like, I like it going all over the place, but nonetheless, there are some people that really wanted to know some stuff. So my brother was actually the first one to respond to this. And the thing he was asking, it says, how does it make you feel knowing that your movie and or TV shows that you've worked on are some of the greatest of all times, meaning Doug and Orange is the New Black, and / cult classics? How does that make you feel? Or does that weird to you? Or
No, I feel really lucky. That's how I feel.
Mhm.
I feel really grateful and I feel really lucky. It's really hard being an artist, a
Yeah.
chef, a musician, an actress, any type of it's really difficult.
Mhm.
And a lot of people want to do it. And a lot of people are really good at it and want to do it and are struggling. So, I look back and I've been really lucky to be in some great films and some great projects. I mean, I get stopped a lot about fried green tomatoes. And, I had a silly, ridiculous little role in there.
Yeah.
But the movie was wonderful and has resonated with a lot of people. You brought up Fletch Lives before. I can't tell you many people have said that movie has resonated deeply with them. But
I'm a huge Chevy fan. I love that. I don't know if it's slapstick comedy, but I love that style of comedy, that just wacky zany. It's just super silly.
yeah, of course.
And
Right.
I don't know what it was. I probably sat down and watched it with my grandpa, and it's just one of those fond memories I have.
I think that was my first movie.
Yes, yes.
And I was totally freaking out there too, because I loved Chevy Chase also. And I hadn't done a movie before. And they're like, your film is on an airplane with Chevy Chase.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, Saturday Night Live, Chevy Chase, what? And, and I sat next to him on an airplane and we had this scene together. And he was pretty intimidating, I got to say.
He's a big guy too. Like I said, I've loved all the stuff that he's done. He's just one of those guys that's just. Yeah. What did you pick up anything, or did he take you under his wing type of thing? Like, hey, give you any?
Oh no.
No.
No, there was no being taken under his wing.
Oh,
I mean, he would have thrown me on the wing on the airplane, but no, he was not taking me under his wing. He was actually, I remember, he was sort of a prankster, trickster a little bit, because he knew I was totally green and I was sitting there and I had a nose job or something in the scene. So my entire nose was all taped up in the scene and I was all black and blue. So I looked ridiculous and I'm sitting next to him in this interior set, of an airplane. And I had the scene and he would push the little button to push my seat back. So he did that a couple times and he was like, yeah, he was a goof. He was not mentoring me or trying to make my day easier. No, he was being ridiculous, which was him, and it was fun. And but that was my first film experience. I'm sure there have been a lot of people that have mentored in their own ways without knowing that they're doing it. And you know what? In a weird way, what did I walk away with from Chevy Chase? Don't take yourself too seriously on your first day of something. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's good. That's good advice.
And it is. Yeah. That's exactly right. And so you pick up little bits from all these people that you work with.
Well, that goes back to what we were saying earlier. I go from one place to the next. I'm saying what Jake was saying. I'm saying what Sam was saying.
That's right.
Yeah.
You pass on those little, tidbits that somebody gets you. I'm going to walk away from this with a new vacuum. So it's like
exactly.
No, and
nothing else. It's a vacuum.
Well, I love the podcast environment. I think it's really nice. And and to have an opportunity to meet somebody new and sort of share experiences of something that was very meaningful.
Mhm.
And Doug was very meaningful in my life, and it's a gift to do this. So I really appreciate you wanting to talk to me.
Like I said, man, this excuse me, got all choked up there for a second. We talk about vacuums, and we sidelined here. Yeah, I mean it's fantastic. This medium alone, like this year's been super crazy. There's a lot of this going on now. It's people are communicating through a computer, people communicating through a phone, and with as much crazy shit as going on, it's always nice to talk to the people you looked up to and you still look up to, and then find out not only are they human, right?
Yeah,
Because you get this sense of like, oh, this guy's going to be this way or this lady's going to be this way or vice versa, and it's very refreshing because I've talked to some people on here and they just don't want to talk, or they're very guarded, I guess is a better word.
mm-hmm.
So it's always refreshing when I can sit here and tell you about a great vacuum I bought, or we can talk about Chevy Chase hitting your buttons and making your seat go up and down. So,
Right.
like I said, it's always fun.
And it's an incredible opportunity as we're living in sort of a masked time in our lives. We can see somebody's full face on
Yeah.
here. And it's very up close and personal. And this whole Zoom world that we're living in has made it like that. But look, where else would I be able to see where you actually live? I'm on a blank wall here because I was just trying to make it. But believe me, there's a lot going on in here too. And you kind of feel like it's a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
So
And that's what we're missing in this day and age of social media and everything being done on a computer, because you can lose a lot through a text or through a phone call even, because
of course.
I'm super animated. My hands are always going all over the place.
Yeah.
So you miss that somewhat of a connection. But when it's face to face, eyeball to eyeball, peepers to peepers type of thing, I think you get more out of it. You feel like you're actually talking to somebody, somebody else is going through the motions, I suppose.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like I said, it's been fun. So we'll wrap it up with just a couple more.
Okay.
And then the next one was, I can't pronounce that name. Sorry, whoever that, I can't pronounce their last name. However, they wanted to know, was Patti Mayonnaise or was Yoga Jones? Who was more of you with those scenes, or who resonated more, I guess?
Oh, well, I guess how I would answer it is those were at two very different points in my life, those characters. So Patty was early mommy time for me, and I and yoga was much older kids and had lived more life.
Yeah.
And I guess the fragility or the vulnerability of Yoga Jones touched me very, very deeply. At the same time, the spunk and charm of this young girl spoke to me. So it was weird because you're experiencing these characters at very different times in your life. They're going to have very different meanings and they're going to resonate differently. Yeah. So Patty was probably very true to how because I had a little kid, so I was digging into a little kid myself. Much later, I've lived through a lot more and can also step into Yoga Jones's shoes and understand how life can throw you hard balls. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I like seeing that duality, that young, before you when you lose your innocence type of thing. And then you get out of mommy and daddy's house and you really experience some shit and you see some stuff and you've been around and had
when you're a parent and you've had a child, you age in a different way.
I think it's for the better, because I have a 10-year-old, right? And I had him in 2012. No, I'm sorry, 2010, because 2012 was a different time frame. 2010, And I was, I think 20, 21, somewhere around there. And that's not that young to have a kid, but like,
It's young.
it's
I
young.
was 38 when I had my first kid. It's
Yeah.
young.
So it's that, and then coupled with being deployed consistently, and then being freshly married, you have to grow up quick. And I was always one of those guys that I didn't party, I didn't care for it, I don't drink, so it was just, I had other things. I like cartoons, TV shows, movies, wrestling, that type of stuff. So it's crazy, a year before you have a kid, and then you follow up. If you could do a check-in with yourself a year after, the growth alone is just outstanding and phenomenal and weird in a sense, because you go from this to still doing this type of stuff, but now there's a little person that you guys created between you and your spouse, and they do stuff like you, or they look like you, and they've got their own little personality. And then you kind of have to grow up quicker than they're growing up, right? So I mean, it's
gotta stay a little bit ahead to be
Yeah.
able to, because you want to be able to handle the curveballs that are going to come their way.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. I sort of and it's very hard to watch yourself on screen, seeing sort of the weatheredness of me as Yoga Jones. I could see, wow, I've lived a lot of life since the Patti days, for sure.
Well, I mean, it's you've done such a fantastic job with what you've done. Not very many people would put their kids ahead of their career. When I was in the Navy, I kind of had to put not him on the back burner, but when the government said I had to go somewhere, I had to go somewhere. So I missed. So so now with what I'm doing now, I don't give a shit what it is. It could be my food career. It could be this podcasting career. He'll always come first.
Yeah.
If I can physically be there, emotionally be there, mentally be there, I will be there, and
I think most parents feel that way. It's just, you're incredibly lucky and fortunate if you are able to say, I'm going to stay and help and be home with them.
Yeah.
And so those 15 years, the luckiest, I felt like the luckiest person in the world to be able to do that. Most people aren't financially able to just say, I'm going to stay at home and take care of you. And it's a gift to be able to do that. Absolutely.
Well, when they're a little older, they're going to realize, man, mom really went through the ringer for us. She put so much on hold for us. And, at the end of the day, they're really going to look back and they're like, wow, this was fantastic.
No, they absolutely do. They do that. Yes. No. Yeah.
With the last question, and then we'll wrap it up. If you had a choice, Patti, Yoga, they came to you and said, we will greenlight one solo series for you. Which one you taking? You taking Patti or you taking Yoga?
Oh. Well, I guess I'd sort of like to revisit Patti, honestly.
Now, would you take Patti as a teenager, or do you want Patti with a couple kids?
I want Patti with a couple of kids.
Yeah. Well,
absolutely. So make it happen, Julian. Make it happen.
I'm making dreams come true with vacuums and hopefully a new show coming out.
I'm like Jim Jenkins, wherever you are, if you're listening, how fun to revisit those characters older.
I mean, they did it with Rugrats. Why not Doug? In my opinion, Doug was better than Rugrats.
Well, you and I are putting it out there. That was an excellent question from whoever sent it in. You're such an easy person to talk to. Thank you so much for thinking of me to do this. And, just keep cooking and keep being a great dad.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, before we let it go, is there anything that you're working on that you can talk about, or is there anything that you would like people to know that you're working on?
Okay. Well, I have been writing a book about being a young girl growing up in East Tennessee for about 10 years. I am coming down the end here. We're living in a crazy thing. So as an actress, projects that I have all been on Zoom. Everything got shut down. It's coming back to life, but I have been doing so many amazing Zoom plays on here. So, I'd have to give a million different little links to find them, but just know that there is um, life as an actor is still going on. Things are starting back up, but I've been spending a lot of this time writing, probably like a lot of people have been.
Okay, when I post this one, when I release this video for the podcast, I'll get with you, and then I'll make sure I get some of those links so we can put them into the description so people can go and check you out.
Sounds great.
I have been Julian at End My Head Pod. You can see us down on the screen. This has been Connie. Connie, it was fun. It was fantastic. I can't wait to do this again down the road. I hope you have a great time. Hug those kids, and hopefully you can get a new vacuum right after this call.
Thank you so much, Julian. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This podcast was presented by the Epic Sewers Podcast Network, the home of all your pop culture podcast needs, with shows like Epic Tales from the Sewer, the Spoiler Force Podcast, CreatorCon Q&A, Comic Watchers, and the What's in My Head podcast. Follow us on this journey and get down and nerdy as we bring you the best in pop culture.